Hi, I'm Paige. At 10 years old, my half-sister and her friends pinned me to a fence post, yanked my hair, laughed that I smelled like cows because I lived on a farm. That was the day something cracked in me. Not just my head, but the illusion that family meant safety. No one stopped them. Not my father, not my mother, not even the wind that carried their laughter down the pasture. So how did I survive? And why, years later, did that same sister come back, still wanting more? Let me tell you what they didn't see coming. Let me tell you what happened after the Marines showed up. I stand in the fading Texas light, boots crunching over dry grass, the wind carrying with it the faint tang of cattle, cedar, and dust. Out here, the horizon stretches wide and endless, but my eyes find only one thing: the fence post. Splintered now, leaning slightly, scarred with weather. It still stands on the edge of my property, stubborn and worn. To anyone else, it's just wood driven into dirt. To me, it's a witness, a marker of the day I learned what betrayal looks like, not from strangers, but from blood. I reach out and trace the rough grain with calloused fingers. The grooves catch my skin. For a moment, I close my eyes and I see her. Paige, me, but younger. Dirt-streaked, sneakers frayed, hair tied back too tight, stepping off the bus at 13. That younger self lives here still, hovering at the edge of my memory, pressed against the post like a ghost. 13 years later, I've built something from this land: a house, a farm, a name. But tonight, it feels like all I ever did was stagger through pain, clutching at scraps of hope, waiting for someone, anyone, to see me. It was morning once. I was 10 years old. The school bus hissed to a stop by the big oak tree near the county road. My backpack sagged off one shoulder, straps worn thin, seams fraying. I smelled of hay, horses, sweat, and long chores before sunrise. The April heat stuck to me like glue, my shirt damp, clinging. When I stepped off, I hardly lifted my head. I wanted to be invisible, but invisibility doesn't last when cruelty is looking for a target. Callista was waiting, my half-sister, perfect hair, polished shoes, flanked by two girls from her class. I sensed them before I saw them, their laughter slicing through the morning stillness. "Smell that? It's her again," Callista announced, her grin sharp as a blade. I kept my head down. My heart thumped so loud I was sure everyone heard. One girl jabbed my shirt with a finger. The other leaned in, her voice dripping with practiced scorn. "Farm girl." They said it like a slur, like dirt itself was shame. Then came the shove. My backpack yanked. My balance faltered. Fingers knotted in my hair, tugging hard enough to pull stars into my eyes. I tumbled, slammed against the post. The wood groaned. My forehead struck its edge. Pain split my vision, bright and hot. Laughter poured into the wound, filling it, echoing in my skull. My knees buckled. Dirt scraped raw against my palms. I thought I might vomit. I pushed up slowly, dazed, the world tilting. And then I saw him. My father. Across the field, leaning against his truck, arms folded. Watching. He saw everything. The girl's hands in my hair, Callista's smirk, the blood wetting my skin. He saw me hunched small against that post, humiliation pouring over me. And he did nothing, not a word, not a step forward. His eyes held me for one long, cutting moment, and then he turned away. My father turned away. Something inside me cracked then, not just the skin on my forehead, not just my knees in the dirt. My belief that family protects, that fathers intervene, that love means action. That moment carved a line deep into the wood, into me. I wanted to shout, to scream. "Why didn't you stop them? Why didn't you see me?" But my voice wouldn't come. I tasted copper and dirt. The bruise bloomed slow and mean, but the wound that stayed was deeper. Did he believe I wasn't worth fixing? I didn't cry. Not then. I pressed my hand against the cut, feeling sticky blood, feeling small and hollow. My backpack hung crooked, straps twisted. The school bus loomed beside me, its yellow paint glaring. I pressed myself against its side, unsure if I should run home, climb aboard, or vanish altogether. That hollow ache never left. Now, standing here tonight, older and weathered. I measure the distance from this fence post to my front porch. Each footstep I've taken since then belongs to me. I built my life across this ground, laid claim to it inch by inch, but silence has weighed too heavily for too long. I stare at the wood, splintered and bowed with time. I press my palm flat against it, marking it, leaving my imprint where my head once struck, where her laughter once rang, where his eyes once turned away. My whisper rides the wind. You saw me. The words scatter into the night. I know he heard, wherever he is, but did he ever understand? The sky drains to ink, crickets stitching soft rhythms across the fields. I inhale deeply, cedar and cattle hide thick in my lungs, and I know this: I am no longer that girl hiding behind mud and mockery. I built a house here. I carved out a name. I raised animals, grew crops, signed deeds. I survived. Paige didn't vanish. She grew into me. I take one last look at the post, then turn toward the farmhouse. The animals low in their stalls, the scent of roasting green beans drifting from the kitchen. I carry a tray of milk bottles inside, blinking against lamplight. I place them down, wash my hands, set the table. Life moves forward, simple, steady. Later, in the quiet of night, I lie awake under the hum of crickets, the memory pressing against me. And I understand something I didn't before. I never want someone else's laughter to define me again. Because I am no longer invisible. I am the one who remembers, the one who builds, the one who refuses to turn away. Even before the echo of boots struck that dry soil behind me, I knew something had shifted in the air. The Texas evening pressed heavy against my chest, the horizon bruised with twilight. The sun was bleeding itself out, orange dissolving into deep blue, a wash of color that always reminded me of old scars. I had driven home along the county road thinking of the fence post, thinking of how much it had taken just to walk past my childhood without crumbling. And then, boots. Heavy, deliberate, each step crunching against the brittle earth. My body froze as if I were still 10 years old, my heartbeat cracking like kindling in a fire. My breath stuck in my throat, and in an instant, memory poured in, the sting of laughter, the weight of humiliation, the ache of being unseen. The figure came into view through the haze of dust. Mother. Isolde. She stepped forward in full silhouette, the hem of her marine boots kicking up dirt with each stride. Time had carved lines into her face, softened her edges, but nothing could erase the authority in her posture. She carried herself like someone who had faced storms and survived them. Even after years away, she stood taller than anyone else in that field. Behind her, the two girls who had taunted me, Callista's shadows, cruel in their imitation of her, stumbled backward. Their laughter evaporated into silence, replaced by the slap of their sneakers against dirt, quick and uncertain. I flinched when one of them reached out, reflex carved from years of expecting hurt. But Mother moved between us, her stance commanding, immovable. She didn't shove, she didn't raise her voice. Her presence alone was enough to still the air, her words cut sharper than any shout. "You don't treat people by how they smell," she said, voice low but fierce. "You treat them by what they stand for." The sentence hung heavy, thick with a weight I hadn't known language could carry. She didn't need to curse. She didn't need to posture. She simply existed as a wall between me and the cruelty I had known too long. For once, the world tilted. For once, someone stood up, not for Callista's games, not for my father's silence, but for me. Later that night, I felt her hands clean the blood from my face, her touch steady as she dabbed away the sting with a damp cloth. She wiped not just the wound, but the tears I had tried to swallow. In that quiet, I learned something that would shape me long after. Strength doesn't always announce itself in noise. Sometimes it is quiet, sometimes it is calm, sometimes it is the act of standing still, refusing to turn away. Years later, I returned to that same fence post. The wood was grayer now, sun-bleached and splintered, leaning but not broken. I brushed my fingertips along its grain, feeling the grooves bite faintly into my skin. The memory surged fast. Callista's sneer, the sharp yank of hair, the pain splitting my forehead, the way my father's eyes had fixed on me, close enough to act, but far enough to abandon. But I stood taller now, my shoulders squared, my breath even. A life had grown out of the ashes of that field, work hardened into calluses, years stacked into resilience. I wasn't 10 anymore. I wasn't waiting for rescue. Dinner at my house, years later, should have felt like victory. I was 23 then, with walls I had built myself, with rooms that bore my name. Yet as we sat at the table, the bitterness resurfaced. Callista laughed across from me, mocking in her retelling of old stories she thought I'd never dare mention. My father pushed food around his plate, avoiding every glance. Mother's eyes stayed low, fixed on her meal as though memory was too raw to touch. I forced the words out, heavy but necessary. It's been 13 years. I stayed here while you walked away. No one looked up, except Mother. Her gaze flickered, sharp, carrying more than she could say aloud. When I was 10, after the fall, I had tried to get up alone. My knees shook. My palms stung with dirt. My shirt stuck damp against the gash in my forehead. Embarrassment burned hotter than the physical pain. I limped back toward the bus, trembling, a whisper clawing inside me. I'll never let this define me. Now, as an adult, I carried that whisper with me everywhere. Tonight, I drove past the old farmhouse. Headlights sliced through darkness, spitting against weathered wood and shuttered windows. The paint peeled, the porch sagged, yet in my chest the past flared vivid. Laughter ringing cruel, blood dripping slow, silence louder than thunder. The steering wheel pressed hard under my grip, my knuckles white. The radio played something soft, a melody rolling through the speakers like a promise I wasn't sure I believed yet. My jaw tightened. My voice broke through the hum, barely above a mutter. You never saw me then, but you're about to. And the night swallowed the words whole, carrying them forward across the fields, back toward that post, back toward every moment I had been invisible. Only this time, I wasn't disappearing. I was preparing to be seen. It was dark when I finally pulled into the driveway, headlights slicing across the sagging barnwood and the weather-worn siding of the farmhouse. The gravel crunched beneath my tires, a sound that always reminded me of long returns, of nights when the weight of survival pressed heavier than the dust on my boots. My old truck coughed and sputtered as I shut off the engine, its echo fading into the stillness. I stepped out, case files tucked under my arm, phone clutched in my hand. The files smelled faintly of dust and sweat, pages smudged with ink where my palms had lingered too long. In my pocket, the memory of the fence post pressed like a stone, an ache I carried from the afternoon when I had stood there tracing splinters and remembering blood, silence, and laughter that never truly left me. I locked the truck, keys rattling like coins in a jar, and for one fragile second I thought I might let the quiet stretch, that maybe tonight would let me breathe. But then the phone beeped. Caller ID. Callista. My heart kicked hard against my ribs. For a moment, all I could do was stare at her name glowing coldly on the screen. My blood hummed with dread, with anger, with something else too, resolve. 13 years of silence, 13 years of unfinished business. Tonight, I answered. Hello? My voice steadier than I expected. Paige, she said, her tone deceptively polite, smooth as glass. It's me. You want something, I answered flatly, stepping into the doorway of the farmhouse. The hinges moaned as I leaned against the frame. The night smelled of hay and rain on old wood, familiar and heavy. A pause, then her sweetness cracked, revealing the sharp edge beneath. I want my half. The farm is family land. It deserves to be split. The words landed like a nail driven through my chest. I closed my eyes. The farm, this patch of soil and wood I had coaxed into life, where I had poured sweat into feeding animals, where I had chosen survival over surrender, suddenly reduced to a bargaining chip. Because our father's name was still etched on the deed, Callista believed she had a right to claim what she had abandoned. I let the silence stretch long enough to sting, then answered. You left this place when things got messy. You walked away. I stayed. I built. You don't get to come back now and claim my work. Her laughter crackled through the line, sharp and cruel. We'll see what the lawyers say. It felt like a slap across the face. My fist curled tight around the phone. Before she could say another word, I ended the call. The silence that followed pressed against my chest, heavier than her voice had been. I stepped inside. The floorboards moaned beneath my weight like they remembered every step I had ever taken across them. The kitchen light glowed dim. My mother, Isolde, stood at the sink, her silhouette framed by the yellow bulb overhead. She didn't turn when I entered, didn't need to. She had always been like that, sensing before seeing. For a long moment I just stood there, watching her hands still in the water, the curve of her shoulders. Every step I had taken from the fence post to this doorway had been for one reason: to arrive here, to hold what was mine without shame. And now Callista threatened to cut it in half with words sharper than any knife. I filled a glass at the tap, drank slowly. The water slid uneven down my throat, but in its coolness, something cleared. I walked to my desk, opened the laptop, my fingers hovering over the keys. Mother's words from long ago stirred in me. "You rise above," she had said once, as if dignity was the strongest muscle a body could ever build. The phone rang again. This time the screen lit with her number. Mother. I didn't hesitate. "Hello?" Her voice, softer than Callista's had ever been, carried through the line. "Paige." The calm steadied me. Before I could stop myself, the words rushed out, my voice breaking. "Callista called. She's demanding half the farm." Silence stretched for a moment. Then Mother sighed, a sound weighted with history. "I heard from someone. She's stirring up trouble again." I leaned into the desk, eyes closing. "Why now?" "Because your father's signature gives her leverage," she said. Her tone was steady, almost soldier-like. "Because she believes blood entitles her. But strength isn't inherited, Paige. It's earned." Her words struck deep. Earned. I swallowed against the lump in my throat. If strength were owned by bloodlines, no one would ever feel robbed. If honesty were owed automatically, perhaps the past would not ache so much. I turned on the desk lamp, its yellow glow cutting through the shadows. The light illuminated a photograph propped beside it, me at 11, smiling awkwardly between mother and father before everything cracked. In the corner, Callista leaned into the frame, her arms slung across my shoulder, her laugh aimed away at someone else. Even there, I wasn't the one she saw. I traced the rim of a chipped coffee mug, cold now, cracks spidering through its ceramic. I remembered Mother smoothing my hair once, whispering promises she couldn't keep. "You stay here. I'll come back." And she had gone again, pulled away by duty, while the man meant to protect me, my father, stood silent. Always silent. His absence louder than words. Through the window, the moonlight poured silver across the yard. The fence post I had visited earlier stood in silhouette, casting a jagged shadow across the ground, as if waiting, for me or against me. I reached for a legal pad, scribbled words in uneven lines: deed, boundary, ownership, photographs, witnesses. I opened a blank document on the laptop, typed one word in bold letters as the file name: lawyer. It wasn't about rage. It wasn't about revenge. It was about proof, preparation. Fighting not with fists, but with truth. Mother came quietly behind me, wrapping a blanket around my shoulders. Her voice dropped low, tender, and firm. "No more hiding." I nodded, the weight of her words settling over me like armor. I tapped save and shut the laptop. Sleep would evade me tonight, I knew. But for once, anticipation didn't feel hollow, it felt alive. Morning would come, and with it, the fight. And when it did, I would be ready to face what had always been mine. I wasn't going to wait for the next attack. This time, I'd strike first. The morning sun stretched low across the horizon, golden light spilling across my fields and catching on the dew-beaded grass. The air smelled of cedar and dust, faint traces of cattle carried on the breeze. I wheeled the heavy wooden gate open and stood back for a moment, breathing in the familiar scent of hay, rain-soaked earth, and wood shavings newly scattered in the barn. It was the day of the regional vendor event, and I wanted my farm to greet people with life, not just survival. The barn doors had been swept until the floors glowed pale. Gingham cloths draped the rows of tables where jars of honey gleamed like amber glass, jams sparkled in deep reds and purples, and rounds of goat cheese sat cool and proud. Beside them, baskets overflowed with apples I'd sliced fresh that morning, their sweet tang perfuming the air. A breeze lifted strands of my hair, and for a moment I closed my eyes. Today wasn't about proving anything to strangers. It was about showing myself, Callista, and everyone who had once believed I'd vanish into silence, that I wasn't disappearing again. Neighbors wandered in first, nodding and calling greetings. A few chefs from Austin, crisp aprons tucked under their arms, leaned in to taste samples. Curious families stopped at stalls, children tugging at their parents' sleeves, eyes bright at the sight of jars glittering in the sun. I smiled, shook hands, offered slices of cheese and jam on wooden spoons. My palms sweated in the morning warmth, but my movements were calm, deliberate. Still, a pulse of tension lingered beneath my skin. I knew she would come. Callista always came, when my confidence looked unguarded, when she sensed even a shadow of vulnerability. And then she did. I saw her before I smelled the perfume. Sharp, expensive, layered too heavy for a farm morning. She stepped from behind a vendor tent, leather handbag dangling from her arm, heels clicking in the dirt as if she were allergic to soil. Her smile was thin, a blade disguised as courtesy. Before I could brace myself, her hand clamped around my arm. Hard. She yanked me forward, the crowd parting in stunned silence. "You stealing business by pretending to be rustic?" she hissed, her voice sharp enough to cut. "You think people actually want to buy from a farm girl?" The grip burned. My skin tingled under her fingers, my body reacting with the old instinct to shrink, to flinch. But I didn't. Heat flooded my cheeks, my chest hammered, but I didn't bow this time. I locked eyes with her. My voice came steady, not loud, but enough to still the air. "You're not touching me again. Ever." Her sneer deepened. She shoved harder, just enough for the gesture to sting. Gasps broke from the crowd. A few guests stepped back, muttering. A vendor 2 stalls down shifted awkwardly, eyes sliding away as though he could disappear into his crates of produce. Then, from the far end, a seasoned farmer spoke, voice low but certain. "She's always been trouble. But you've done all right." The words steadied me more than he could know. I pulled free, excused myself with calm dignity, even as my arm throbbed where her grip had bruised. Inside the farmhouse, I closed the office door behind me with a deliberate push, shutting out the murmurs and camera phones I knew were already recording. My phone buzzed with a new notification. I unlocked it, stomach tightening. On the screen, a video already circled. Me, caught mid-sentence, my expression frozen in an awkward angle. Callista's practiced tilt edited to look like she was defending herself rather than attacking me. The headline screamed, "Unstable farm girl assaults her sister." I read the comments as they poured in, faster than rain sliding off a tin roof. They judged my posture, my accent, my skin. Not one mentioned her shove. Not one remembered the jars of honey or the goat cheese samples or the hours I had poured into this land. Sponsors that had once promised contracts quietly slipped away. Messages popped up, orders canceled, meetings postponed, opportunities fading like morning mist. I stood at the counter, my fists trembling, my throat tight. I considered breaking something, throwing the mug against the wall, shattering the glass in my hand. But I didn't. I forced a breath into my chest and pulled my phone again. I called Bryn. My oldest friend, the one who had seen me at both my most humiliated and my most defiant. "It's worse," I told her, voice sharp with held-in tears. "She's twisting it again. She's pushing a narrative I never signed up for." I heard Bryn inhale sharply on the other end. "Paige, listen, you're not alone. We're going to fight this, and you're not hiding this time." Her certainty steadied me. That evening, the golden light slanted through the kitchen window, long shadows stretching across the counter as I tallied the damage. Contracts gone, support wavered, reputation bent out of shape by Callista's lies. But under all of it, beneath the ache and fury, something fierce burned steady. I remembered boots in the dust, Mother stepping forward in her uniform when boys had laughed at me long ago. I remembered her words, the low fierceness of them. Strength isn't always loud. And I knew then, I didn't need to break Callista down to build something authentic. I needed witnesses. I needed truth. I began planting the seeds of proof. Screenshots of video evidence, photographs of the vendor tables with date stamps, contracts signed, lists of canceled orders with clear timelines, every shred documented. I typed a legal statement, steady, stripped of pity. Then I pressed record on my phone. My reflection filled the screen, face tired, eyes lined, but voice steady. "This is my story," I said. "Not hers, not anyone else's. Any distortion, any lie, it ends with this." I posted it. No theatrics, no apology. Outside, the barn lights flickered on as dusk bled across the fields. Animals lowed in their stalls, settling for the night. I stepped outside, the air thick with the scent of damp grass and cooling earth. Fence rails caught the last glow of twilight. I walked slow, deliberate, each step a choice not to vanish. At the gate, I stopped. The silence of the land wrapped around me, steady and grounding. I closed my eyes for a moment and whispered, not a plea, not a cry. No, just a promise. I will be seen, and she'll regret she ever tried to steal what belongs to me. And in the night, the earth seemed to hear. They say voices can't hurt you once they're true. I never believed that, until today. My phone glowed in my hand, the blue-white light painting shadows across the kitchen wall. On the screen, my own voice replayed from the video I'd just recorded. Steady, unshaken, carrying truths I had once swallowed like bitter medicine. The taunts, the bruise, the laughter from Callista, the silence from my father. All of it, spoken plainly into digital light. My hands trembled as I listened, but not from fear. The trembling came from ownership, from knowing I had given my pain a spine and it no longer bent under someone else's weight. I pressed post. For years I had whispered, or worse, kept silent. Tonight I had spoken, not to beg, not to plead. I didn't ask for pity. I demanded recognition. Morning broke with the kind of electricity that makes your skin prickle before a storm. My phone buzzed like it was alive, notifications stacking faster than I could swipe them away. The video had already leapt across screens, shared, dissected, judged. Some comments made me pause, exhale, let my shoulders lower. "Thank you for speaking up. I saw myself in your story." Words from strangers who understood the sharp cut of humiliation, who recognized themselves in the grain of my story. Others cut harder. "She's making drama. Farm girl just fishing for sympathy." Those words stung, but not like before. I felt the sting, acknowledged it, then let it move through me. Because this time, I had already chosen the truth over silence. I stepped into the barn as the sun rose higher, damp earth soft beneath my boots. The goats bleated at me, impatient for feed. The air smelled of hay and rain-soaked wood, grounding me in the life I had built with my own hands. Whatever was happening beyond these fences, I reminded myself, this was real, this was mine. By noon, I drove into town. The gravel lot at Rosie's Diner was nearly full, sun baking the hoods of trucks lined side by side. Mr. Halford's old Ford sat beside mine, faded green paint chipped along the bumper. Inside, the diner buzzed with quiet talk, coffee steaming in paper cups. Dusty sunlight filtered through blinds, catching on motes that danced in the air. Halford sat at a corner table, leaning forward with elbows on the worn laminate. Lines cut deep around his eyes, not just from age, but from years of drought and long harvests. His hands, thick with calluses, wrapped around a coffee cup as though it might anchor him. When I slid into the booth across from him, he studied me with the careful gaze of someone who had already weighed the truth and found it solid. "About time someone exposed her," he said finally. His voice was low, steady. "I saw what she did years ago, with my niece." My throat tightened. I blinked, waiting. He reached into a battered leather folder, pulled out an envelope, and slid it across the table. Inside, photographs, receipts, handwritten notes, evidence his niece had tucked away and given to him for safekeeping. She used my niece's name to apply for seed grants, Halford said. Lied about the hours. Claimed harvests she never touched. I kept the proof. Figured someday someone would need it. I held the envelope carefully, as if it might splinter. It wasn't just paper, it was teeth. And for the first time in days, my pulse leveled. The support started small, but it was real. Neighbors called, some with awkward apologies for the years they had turned a blind eye. Gossip shifted from whispers of doubt to messages of belief. Others still kept their distance. I expected that. Betrayal had always been cheaper than loyalty. I braced myself for it. But in that diner, people looked at me differently, straight into my eyes instead of past me. I'll never forget the woman who pushed her chair back and said simply, "I believe you." That one word, believe, landed inside me like rain after a long drought. When I stood to leave, my palms flat on the cool tabletop, I turned to the small crowd that had gathered, their forks stilled mid-air, their gazes curious but open. "If you want to know the truth," I said, my voice carrying just enough, "ask me. I'm done being the shadow in her story." The silence that followed held steady for a beat. Then, from somewhere in the back, hands began to clap, soft, hesitant. Others joined, slowly, until the sound grew. Not thunderous, not dramatic, but steady, real. Back at the farmhouse that evening, the porch light flickered through the window as dusk crawled across the land. I sat at my desk, laptop open, fingers hovering over the keyboard. The smell of coffee lingered from the half-empty mug beside me, ceramic chipped at the rim. I began drafting, each line crisp, legal, unambiguous. A cease defamation notice, documentation of financial manipulation, attached photographs with timestamps, receipts, witness statements. This wasn't just about me anymore. This was about every story someone had buried under lies because no one believed them. Then, mid-keystroke, a new alert, new email, subject line, cease and desist. My chest tightened as I clicked it open. Words filled the screen, threatening. Phrases like defamation, irreparable harm to reputation, legal action forthcoming. At the bottom, Callista's name. My heart jackhammered. For a split second, fear pricked at me. But then, something clearer, sharper, pushed through. This wasn't terror. It was clarity. They could try to silence me, bury me under paper threats, but they had already awakened something too loud, too steady, too rooted to be undone. I shut the laptop and stepped outside into the cooling evening. Crickets hummed steady. The fence line stood dark against the lavender sky, joints creaking in the breeze. I breathed in the scent of damp grass and earth, felt the air slide into my lungs. And in that breath, I realized something undeniable. I wasn't fragile anymore. I wasn't the girl against the fence post, silenced by laughter and my father's turned-away eyes. I was here. I was unhidden. I was ready. And when dawn came, it would find me standing tall, prepared to defend not just what was mine, but the truth that was finally, fully, mine to tell. The day broke gray and heavy, the kind of dawn where the dew clings thick to the grass and the air feels half asleep but full of weight. I stepped out onto the porch, mug in hand, my pulse hammering against my ribs as if I'd already run miles. The cease and desist letter still sat in my office drawer, but it didn't haunt me the way it had when I first opened it. Instead, it carved something sharp in my chest, like steel forming under pressure. Fear had burned away. What remained was a blade. I filled my mug with bitter coffee, the kind that scalds the throat but wakes the bones, and I let its warmth ground me. My boots crunched over the gravel as I crossed the yard toward the barn office. Under one arm, I carried papers, case files, receipts, my trail of evidence, and in my other hand, my phone, ready for whatever came. The farm was already alive. Delivery trucks rumbled up the drive, tires snapping twigs and scattering gravel. Workers moved between crates stacked with honey jars, baskets of squash, and bundles of herbs still damp from the morning harvest. The smells wrapped around me, fresh-cut apples, wet hay, a hint of engine oil from the trucks. This rhythm, This pulse of labor and soil steadied the storm building in my chest. Whatever Callista tried to strip from me, this place was sacred. I had earned every acre with sweat and nights too long for tears. Then I saw it. Sleek black paint cutting through dust, a polished SUV that didn't belong on this country road. It crawled up the drive like a predator, too polished for our fields. The door swung open, and Callista stepped out, heels sinking instantly into the dirt. Even the land resisted her. Her perfume hit the air before her words did, sharp and invasive. She stormed past rows of tomato vines, voice rising with each step. "You think you can play the victim forever, Paige?" Every head turned. The workers froze, jars clinking against crates, conversations evaporating into silence. I didn't flinch. Not anymore. They said the quiet ones always broke first. Today, I planned to show them what breaking really looked like, and it wasn't me. She reached the table where I'd laid out wax-sealed jars and cheese wheels. Her manicured hand gripped the edge of the oak frame, rattling the jars, sending a faint creak through the wood. Her eyes burned, her lips curled. "Back off," I said. My voice wasn't raised, but it carried like thunder under a low sky. Calm, clear, enough to slice the tension in the air. Callista sneered. Then her hand flew across my face, sharp and fast, snapping my head to the side. The sting bloomed hot across my cheek, shame and fury braided together. For 1 second, the world stilled, the workers gasping, crates nearly slipping from hands, someone's phone raised behind a stack of produce, recording. I didn't stumble, I didn't cry. My jaw locked, my eyes never left hers. "That," I said, voice cutting low, "was your last free hit." Her pupils widened, just for a heartbeat. The crowd exhaled all at once. She muttered something acidic. "You think you deserve respect?" But I was already walking away. Calm, deliberate, each step a refusal to play the role she wanted. I slipped into the office, closing the door gently, as though sealing the past outside. Inside smelled of cedar polish and paper, the walls lined with certifications, photographs of the farm I had built. Proof, evidence. My life, not hers. I called the attorney's office. My voice was steady, even, as I recounted everything. The video smear campaign, the threats, today's slap. While I spoke, I pressed record on my phone, logging every word for my own record. The agent on the other end promised quick action, a temporary restraining order filed by sundown, a countersuit for defamation already drafted. Evidence was in my favor. Witnesses, live video, social media trails. Callista thought intimidation was power, but this time the weight of her actions was on record. When I hung up, my phone lit again. It was Mom. Isolda's voice, lined with age and battles of her own, slipped through the receiver. "You did what I couldn't do years ago," she said softly. My throat tightened, but my voice stayed clear. I did it for both of us. By midday, word had spread beyond the farm. Neighbors lingered on their porches, some staring with folded arms, others nodding faintly when I passed. I felt the press of their eyes, some filled with solidarity, some with judgment. The farm felt both safer and more vulnerable now, as if truth itself had made the walls transparent. In the afternoon, I walked the boundary fences, checking latches, gates, shutterboards. The sun slipped in and out of clouds, scattering beams of gold across damp fields. Every creak in the wood, every bird call, felt like a signal. I wasn't naive. Retaliation could come, damage to crops, more slander, legal loopholes twisted against me. But I was awake now. The old silence was gone. The words enough lived in me like marrow. By dusk, I sat in the kitchen with Mom, the silence between us thick, but not empty. She handed me a glass of iced tea, condensation slick against my fingers. "Sometimes defending your truth is scarier than being violated," she said, her eyes fixed on the window. I nodded slowly. But staying quiet was killing me. Night fell heavy, stars cutting sharp against the wide Texas sky. I stepped onto the porch, phone buzzing in my hand. A new message blinked from an unknown number. "You think this is over?" That was just a warning. My thumb hovered over delete. And for a moment the old fear rose, whispering that danger was closer than ever. But then I steadied. I didn't erase it, I saved it. Evidence. Another piece of the trail. The screen glowed against the darkness, but my hands no longer shook. I leaned back into the porch rocking chair, listening to the chorus of crickets, the smell of damp hay and earth drifting up from the fields. The warning was loud, but my calm was louder. I closed my eyes and whispered into the night air, "I know who to call." And for the first time in years, the silence felt like it belonged to me. I set my jaw as the courthouse doors slid open before me. The sun was still low, painting the pillars in dusty gold. I walked up the steps alone, until a hush fluttered through the crowd behind me. In uniform, my mother, Isolde, stood framed by the entry, her marine blues crisp, posture controlled, heads turned, eyes widened. In that moment, we occupied the same space, daughter and defender, past and present merged. Inside, the courtroom smelled of polished wood and heavy air. I found my seat. My attorney sat beside me. I lifted my face, met the eyes of those who doubted me. Callista sat on the other side, lashes dark, demeanor tight. I didn't shrink away. I held their stares. The judge called the session to order. Then the video played, the expo camera capturing Callista's grip, the slap, the crowd gathering as I held my ground. It felt like every heartbeat, the injustice, the memory of fear, the blood on that fence post, had led to this moment. I spoke clearly. This farm is my life. The defamation, the assault, the years of silence. This is not about vengeance. It's about accountability. I watched the juror faces shift. I presented witnesses, employees who saw Callista push me, the neighbor recording discreetly, clients whose orders were canceled because of lies. Then I looked toward the back row, where Mother stood. I said, "My mother left me once. She returned in boots and words. She holds me now with both." The courtroom hushed as she stood. She walked forward. She removed her cap. Her voice resonated. I was silent then. I could not protect her. My silence allowed someone to grow into cruelty. Statistically, truth is strongest when spoken. In that room, those words cleared years of doubt. I swallowed as my father cleared his throat. I did not expect him to speak, but he did. He rose slowly, words shaky. I saw them. I saw the bullying. I remained passive, not because I did not care, but because I feared losing what little harmony remained. "I failed you." His gaze came to me. He looked older, worn. I'd carried resentment. Now I felt something brittle shift. His confession was not apology enough, but it was acknowledgement. Outside the courtroom, lightning of media cameras flashed. The restraining order was granted. As we stepped through the courthouse doors, reporters shouted questions. My mother put an arm around me. I inhaled deep. I faced the microphones and said, "Truth doesn't whisper forever." Those words left my lips carrying weight, authority. I was no longer the overlooked child. I was the one who named the hurts. Later that night, stars glimmered over the farm. Inside the kitchen, the old radio hummed low. I sat at the table. My father was silent. Mother rubbed my shoulder. I felt tired but stronger. The wind rattled a window pane. My peaceful facade cracked when I heard the crash of brick against glass. I shot up. In the window, shards glinted. A note dangled from the pane. "You brought war. You'll get it." I held the note trembling, eyes sharp. I knew this was far from over. But that brick spoke less of fear than of confrontation. I folded the paper neatly, folded my resolve with it. I whispered into the night, "Bring it on." The ground was still damp from last night's rain when I walked out of the farmhouse at first light. The smell of wet earth and wood blended with my determination, sharp and clear. 2 weeks had passed since the hearing. The restraining order was in hand. Community whispers had started muscles flexing in their jaws. But today, I held something different. Evidence, leverage, power. Lawyers arrived early at the barn office. I watched as my attorney placed thick folders on the oak table, medical photos, witness statements, social media logs, business damage estimates. I sat across, hands clasped, aware of every breath and tick of the clock. "With this evidence," he said, voice low and certain, It won't just be fines. It could be time. He meant formal civil liability, possible criminal charges. I nodded. No illusions now. Later that afternoon, I recorded another video. Not the emotional version, not vulnerable cry. This time, steady eyes, calm voice. The sun leaned in through windows, casting patterns of light on walls where I once hid. I spoke. This story isn't just mine. It's for everyone who has stayed silent too long. The abuse hidden, the insult coded as joke. This ends now. I showed the bruise I still feel in my chest, the scars I carry in memories. I posted it. Within hours, it spread beyond our county. Women I had never met sent messages. I believed you. So proud you stood up. Same thing happened to me, and I stayed quiet until now. That night, under heat lamp in the barnyard, I heard tires crunch on gravel. I looked up. Callista stood at the edge of the field, yelling into the darkness. Her silhouette sharp against moonlight, she shook her fist. Threats spilled out. Lies about me, about what I said, allegations of wrongdoing. I didn't flinch. I flipped my phone open, pressed 911. Police came swift. They cuffed her. She screamed, "You set me up!" But the sheriff shook his head. "We warned her. You warned her." The video from the expo, the digital threats, the Facebook posts, it all came together. Officers took her phone, her car. She resisted. They noted her violation of the restraining order. It was alive, legal, enforceable. Word spread fast. By morning, the local news picked up the story. "Farm owner makes case," said one headline. "Legal firestorm over family dispute," said another. Callista's face was everywhere, blurred in some shots. People I used to nod to at the feed store turned away. Some avoided eye contact. Some approached me quietly with tears. The weight of expectation and fear hung heavy. But peace, if you could call it that, was in knowing I had struck back with truth, not just words. By dusk, I stood on the porch, hands around a cup of tea. Mother beside me, the older rocking chair empty. Grandmother's chair. I thought about who sat there before, her laughter, her stories, the comfort of her being at home. I missed that. But that chair empty now symbolized something else, a void filled by my resolve. I looked at the horizon, pink, then purple, then dark. The wind rustled the porch boards. My phone buzzed. I opened a text. "Justice has weight, but so do the memories it can't erase." I stared at it, and for a moment, the night felt bigger, more honest than all the fear I used to carry. The text still lingered in my thoughts the next morning. I had deleted it, sure, but its weight had settled into my bones. Justice has weight, but so do the memories it can't erase. I stepped out onto the porch just after dawn. Steam curled from the rim of my coffee mug as I walked slowly toward the railing. The rocking chair beside me creaked with the wind. No one in it, but somehow it still moved, like the past refusing to be still. I glanced at it and for once didn't flinch. The quiet had returned, but not the kind that made your skin crawl, the kind that made you exhale. Birds pecked at the seed I'd scattered along the fence. The flowers I'd planted weeks ago had bloomed, soft purple asters, the kind my grandmother used to favor. I bent to water them, feeling the soil give beneath my fingers. Life moves forward in inches, not miles. Some wins don't come with trophies, just silence where pain used to live. Back inside, the farmhouse smelled of lemon oil and old wood. I made my way into the back room, Grandma's room, still kept mostly how she left it. Sunlight streamed through lace curtains, hitting the bookshelf where I'd hidden the letter. It wasn't written for anyone else, just for the girl I used to be. I pulled it from the back of her Bible, unfolded the creased paper with quiet reverence. "You were never too soft," it read. "You were surviving. And one day, you'll be the one they can't ignore." I stood there, reading those words again. They'd come to me in the middle of a sleepless night, scribbled fast, raw. But now they felt finished. I folded the page and placed it gently back between the pages of Psalms, just behind a photo of me and Grandma on the porch, barefoot and laughing. I was clearing breakfast dishes when I heard tires on gravel. I looked out the kitchen window and saw the truck. Dad. He hadn't come by since the hearing. There had been texts, a few short calls, stiff, like trying to iron silk. I dried my hands, opened the door before he knocked. "Hey," he said, voice low. He held his hat in both hands, like a boy asking permission. "Coffee?" I asked. We sat at the table in near silence, save for the clink of the mugs and the old fridge humming in the background. Finally, he said, "I didn't know how to protect you, Paige." I kept my eyes on my cup. I thought staying out of it meant keeping peace. I set the mug down gently, then looked up. "Silence isn't peace, Dad. It's just quiet fear." He nodded, eyes glassy. "I see that now." I didn't rush to comfort him, but I didn't push him away either. "I forgive you," I said, "for surviving your own way." He looked at me then, not as a daughter he failed, but as a woman who had stopped waiting to be saved. The next Saturday, I went to the farmer's market. The breeze was soft, the kind that carries the smell of cinnamon from baked goods and fresh herbs from stalls. I arranged jars of my honey and soaps with practiced ease. No makeup, no mask. Just me. A little girl tugged at her mother's sleeve near my booth. "That's her," she whispered, wide-eyed. "The brave lady." The mom looked a little embarrassed. "Sorry, she saw your video, recognized your face." I knelt so I was eye level with the girl. "Tell your mom she's brave too." The mother blinked, then nodded. "Thank you, Paige." That evening, as I walked back from the market, the town was quieter than usual. No one shouted from porches, no car stereos thumped bass, just the soft hum of crickets and my footsteps on gravel. At home, I sat again on the porch. The rocking chair had stopped moving. The sky had turned sherbet orange, melting into deep blue. I thought of everything we'd endured, my mother, my father, even me, what we'd chosen to face, what we hadn't. I still heard echoes sometimes, of Callista's voice, of slammed doors, of silence thick with shame. But now I answered them, with truth. You don't always get justice from a courtroom. Sometimes justice is standing on your own land, unafraid, and calling it home. Sometimes the deepest wounds don't leave bruises, they echo in silence through years of being overlooked, underestimated, or ignored. But healing doesn't mean erasing the past. It means owning your truth and finding the courage to speak it, even when your voice shakes. Have you ever stayed silent to keep the peace, only to realize it cost you more than you thought? If this story spoke to you, drop a comment below. I'd love to hear your story too. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel for more powerful, real-life stories that remind us we're never truly alone.